Before America discovered that their beloved cowboy hero could defend Trump's racist comments with shocking language, Clint Eastwood was seen as Hollywood's moral compass, the man who made movies about justice, equality, and doing the right thing. This is the story of how one explosive 2016 interview revealed the dark truth behind the legend, destroyed his progressive image forever, and proved that sometimes our heroes aren't who we think they are. Just fucking get over it. Those words from Clint Eastwood's mouth in August 2016 shattered the image of a man America had trusted for decades. Before that moment, he was the director who made films about overcoming racism and fighting injustice. This is the story of how one interview destroyed that legacy forever. For decades, Clint Eastwood had carefully cultivated an image as Hollywood's moral voice, not through speeches or activism, but through the films he chose to make. By 2016, at 86 years old, he was revered not just as an entertainment icon, but as someone who used his platform to promote understanding, tolerance, and social justice. His directorial work told the story of a man who seemed to understand America's struggles with race and equality. Unforgiven had deconstructed the mythology of the American West, showing the brutal reality behind the heroic facade. $1 Million Baby explored themes of dignity and respect across racial lines. Gran Torino dealt directly with racism and redemption, featuring Eastwood's character overcoming his own prejudices. But it was Invictus that truly cemented his reputation as a progressive voice. The 2009 film about Nelson Mandela's efforts to unite South Africa through rugby was praised for its sensitive handling of racial reconciliation. Critics and audiences alike saw it as evidence that Eastwood understood the complexities of racial healing and the importance of bringing people together rather than driving them apart. Letters from Iwo Jima had shown his ability to humanize America's former enemies, presenting Japanese soldiers as complex individuals rather than stereotypes. Mystic River explored working-class communities with empathy and understanding. Changeling featured a strong female protagonist fighting against institutional corruption. The pattern was clear. Clint Eastwood made films about underdogs, about justice prevailing over prejudice, about the importance of seeing beyond surface differences to find common humanity. He was Hollywood's elder statesman, the director who could tackle difficult subjects with nuance and wisdom. This reputation extended beyond his films. In interviews, he was known for his measured responses, his reluctance to engage in political controversy, and his focus on craftsmanship over ideology. When he did speak about social issues, it was usually in the context of his films and their themes of redemption and understanding. Young filmmakers looked up to him as an example of how to address serious subjects without preaching. Civil rights organizations had praised his work for its thoughtful approach to racial issues. Film schools used his movies as examples of how entertainment could promote social progress without sacrificing artistic integrity. The Clint Eastwood of 2016 was not just a movie star or director. He was a cultural institution, a figure who seemed to represent the best of American values. He was the man who had evolved from playing tough guys to creating complex stories about human dignity and social justice. That carefully built reputation was about to crumble in a single interview. The August 2016 issue of Esquire magazine was supposed to be a celebration. The publication had chosen Clint Eastwood for a major profile, part of their ongoing coverage of Hollywood legends and their lasting impact on American culture. The timing seemed perfect. Eastwood was promoting his new film, Sully, another story about an ordinary man facing extraordinary circumstances with dignity and grace. The interview was conducted by Michael Haney, a veteran journalist who had interviewed countless celebrities and public figures. The setting was Eastwood's production office in Burbank, a space that reflected his no-nonsense approach to filmmaking. The atmosphere was relaxed, with Eastwood appearing comfortable and forthcoming about his career, his methods, and his philosophy. For most of the interview, everything proceeded as expected. Eastwood discussed his approach to directing, his relationship with his actors, and his thoughts on the film industry's evolution. He was articulate, thoughtful, and engaging, Exactly the kind of interview that would reinforce his reputation as a thoughtful artist and cultural elder. But 2016 was not a normal year in American politics. The presidential election was in full swing, and the country was deeply divided. Donald Trump had secured the Republican nomination despite, or perhaps because of, his history of controversial statements about race, immigration, and minorities. The political climate was more toxic than it had been in decades. Trump's campaign had been marked by incidents that many Americans found deeply disturbing. His comments about Mexican immigrants being rapists and criminals, his proposed ban on Muslims entering the country, and his reluctance to disavow support from white supremacist groups had created a national conversation about racism and tolerance that was more intense than anything seen since the civil rights era. Against this backdrop, Haney began asking Eastwood about his political views. The questions started innocuously enough, general inquiries about his thoughts on the election and the candidates. Eastwood initially gave the kind of measured responses that had characterized his public statements for years. But as the conversation continued, something shifted. Perhaps it was the comfort of the familiar setting, or the assumption that he was speaking to a friendly interviewer, or simply the accumulated frustration of someone who felt that his generation's values were being questioned. Whatever the reason, Eastwood began to speak more freely than he had in years. The journalist pressed him specifically about Trump's controversial statements, about the candidate's history of racially charged comments, and about what this meant for the country's future. It was at this moment that the carefully constructed image of Clint Eastwood as a progressive voice began to crack. When Michael Haney asked Clint Eastwood directly about Donald Trump's racist comments and their impact on American society, the 86-year-old director's response shocked everyone who heard it. Instead of the thoughtful, measured answer that his reputation suggested, Eastwood delivered a response that would destroy decades of carefully built progressive credibility. He said a lot of dumb things, so have all of them. Both sides, Eastwood began, seemingly trying to maintain his usual diplomatic approach. But then his tone shifted, becoming more defensive and irritated. But everybody's walking on eggshells. We see people accusing people of being racist and all kinds of stuff. The journalist pressed him about specific instances of Trump's controversial statements, asking whether he thought they were acceptable in public discourse. That's when Eastwood delivered the line that would define the interview and damage his reputation permanently. What Trump said about Mexicans, it's a stupid thing to say. What he said about Muslims, that's stupid too. But you know what? Just fucking get over it. It's a sad time in history. The profanity wasn't what shocked readers. It was the dismissive attitude toward concerns about racism and discrimination. Here was a man who had built his recent career on films about overcoming prejudice, telling Americans to simply get over what many considered dangerous and divisive rhetoric. But Eastwood wasn't finished. As if sensing that his comments might be controversial, he doubled down. Everybody's become so sensitive. You can't say anything anymore without somebody being offended. What the hell? When I grew up, if somebody said something you didn't like, you didn't run crying to your mama. The interview captured a moment of complete contradiction. The man who had directed Gran Torino, a film about confronting racism, was now minimizing concerns about racist rhetoric. The director who had made Invictus, celebrating Nelson Mandela's message of reconciliation, was telling people to get over divisive language. Haney tried to follow up, asking if Eastwood understood why people might be hurt by Trump's comments. The response was even more damaging. People have been saying stupid things forever. The difference is now everybody's got a platform to whine about it. The interview revealed not just political views, but a fundamental misunderstanding of why Trump's comments had been so harmful. Eastwood seemed genuinely confused by the idea that words could cause real damage, that rhetoric could inspire violence, or that public figures had a responsibility to consider the impact of their statements. In less than 5 minutes of conversation, Clint Eastwood had undermined everything his films had seemed to represent about understanding, empathy, and social progress. The Esquire interview hit the internet like a bomb. Within hours of publication, social media exploded with reactions ranging from disappointment to outright fury. The hashtag #Clint Eastwood is over began trending as fans struggled to reconcile the man they had admired with the views he had just expressed. The most painful responses came from those who had seen Eastwood's films as sources of inspiration and hope. African-American actors who had worked with him expressed shock and betrayal. Morgan Freeman, who had starred in Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, declined to comment directly, but his representatives made it clear he was deeply disappointed by Eastwood's remarks. Film critics who had praised Eastwood's nuanced approach to racial issues were forced to reconsider their assessments. The New York Times film critic wrote, "It's impossible to watch Gran Torino the same way after hearing Eastwood dismiss concerns about racism as oversensitivity. Either the film was more cynical than we realized, or the director doesn't understand his own work." The backlash was particularly intense among younger audiences who had discovered Eastwood's films through streaming services and film classes. College students who had written papers about the progressive themes in his work felt betrayed and manipulated. Social media posts showed people literally throwing away DVDs of his films with captions like, "I can't support this anymore." Entertainment industry professionals were equally disturbed. Several prominent directors and actors issued statements distancing themselves from Eastwood's comments. Spike Lee, who had often praised Eastwood's later work, tweeted, "I guess I was wrong about somebody, very wrong." The financial impact was immediate. Sully, the film Eastwood was promoting, saw its opening weekend projections cut by industry analysts who predicted that the controversy would keep audiences away. Several theater chains reported increased cancellations for advanced screenings, but perhaps the most damaging response came from civil rights organizations that had previously praised Eastwood's work. The NAACP issued a statement saying they were profoundly disappointed by his comments and would be reconsidering their previous endorsements of his films. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which had used Gran Torino in educational programs about overcoming prejudice, announced they were removing the film from their curriculum. Their spokesperson said, "We can no longer recommend work from someone who minimizes the real harm caused by racist rhetoric." International reaction was equally harsh. The film was set to premiere at several European film festivals, but organizers began reconsidering their invitations. Critics abroad expressed shock that someone they had viewed as representing the best of American values could hold such views. The Clint Eastwood, who had woken up that morning as a respected elder statesman, was now being treated as a pariah by significant portions of the entertainment industry and his own fan base. In the days following the Esquire interview, Clint Eastwood's representatives scrambled to contain the damage, but their efforts only seemed to make things worse. The first statement from his publicist claimed that his comments had been taken out of context and that he remained committed to equality and understanding for all people. But the full transcript of the interview, released by Esquire, showed that the comments were even more extensive and problematic than initially reported. There were additional remarks about political correctness gone mad and complaints about people looking for reasons to be offended that painted an even more troubling picture. Eastwood himself initially remained silent, following his usual practice of avoiding public controversy. But as the backlash intensified and began affecting his business relationships, he agreed to a follow-up interview with The Hollywood Reporter. The conversation, intended to clarify his position, instead reinforced the impression that he didn't understand why his comments had been so harmful. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true," he insisted. "People are too sensitive these days. They're looking for reasons to be upset." When asked if he understood why his "get over it" comment had been particularly hurtful, he responded, "I'm not going to apologize for telling people to toughen up." The failed damage control efforts revealed a man who seemed genuinely confused by the reaction to his comments. He appeared to believe that his decades of making films with progressive themes should have insulated him from criticism about his personal views. This disconnect between his artistic work and his private beliefs became a subject of intense debate among film scholars and critics. Academic conferences began featuring panels on the Eastwood problem, Discussions about how to evaluate artistic work when the artist's personal views contradict the apparent message of their films. Film schools found themselves having to address uncomfortable questions from students about whether they should still study directors whose personal beliefs they found reprehensible. The controversy also exposed generational and cultural divides within Hollywood. Some older industry figures privately supported Eastwood's comments, agreeing that society had become too sensitive. But they were vastly outnumbered by younger professionals who saw his remarks as evidence of deeper problems with the industry's old guard. Box office tracking showed that Sully underperformed expectations, with exit polls indicating that a significant number of potential viewers had decided to skip the film because of the controversy. The financial impact extended beyond the single film, with several planned projects being quietly shelved as studios worried about the commercial viability of Eastwood's brand. The man who had once been seen as Hollywood's moral compass had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of public figures speaking without considering the consequences of their words. The aftermath of Clint Eastwood's 2016 Esquire interview became a defining moment in discussions about art, politics, and personal responsibility. The controversy forced fans, critics, and industry professionals to grapple with difficult questions about separating artistic achievement from personal beliefs. In the years following the interview, Eastwood continued to make films, but the context had permanently changed. Every new project was scrutinized for political subtext. Every interview was analyzed for signs of his true beliefs. The easy assumption that his films represented progressive values had been shattered, replaced by a more complex and uncomfortable relationship between the artist and his work. The Mule, his 2018 film about an elderly drug courier, was interpreted by many critics as a meditation on an older man's struggle to understand a changing world. But audiences who might have once seen such themes as poignant now viewed them through the lens of his controversial comments, wondering if the character's confusion reflected the director's own resistance to social progress. The interview also became a case study in how quickly public opinion can shift. Eastwood's reputation, built over decades of careful public presentation and thoughtful artistic choices, was fundamentally altered by a few minutes of unguarded conversation. It demonstrated the power of words to destroy trust and the difficulty of rebuilding credibility once it's been lost. Perhaps most significantly, the controversy highlighted the generational divide in American attitudes toward race and social progress. While some older Americans agreed with Eastwood's assessment that society had become too sensitive, younger audiences saw his comments as evidence of exactly the kind of thinking that needed to change. The incident also sparked broader conversations about the responsibilities of public figures and the relationship between personal beliefs and public platforms. It raised questions about whether audiences should consider an artist's personal views when evaluating their work, and whether creative achievement could or should be separated from moral character. Film schools began, including the Eastwood controversy in courses about media ethics and public relations, using it as an example of how quickly careers can be damaged by ill-considered public statements. The interview became required reading in some communication classes as a case study in the importance of understanding your audience and the potential consequences of your words. Years later, the phrase, "just fucking get over it," remained associated with Eastwood's name, a permanent reminder of the moment when America's cowboy hero revealed views that contradicted everything his films had seemed to represent. The man who had made movies about the importance of understanding and overcoming prejudice had told a nation struggling with racism to simply get over it. The legend had spoken, and America had listened. What they heard changed everything. Have you ever had to reconsider your opinion of someone you admired? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Don't forget to hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe if you want videos like this to come. See you in the next story.